Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more esoterica. Today we're diving back into the works of Mr. Rudolph Steiner. This is an outline of occult science we are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book where I teach you to do magic responsibly, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of an outline of occult science with part 4 of chapter 4. And we will not get through all of it today. We will try to find a natural ending place around an hour. Let's dive in. As the Saturn evolution progressed, facts follow of a different kind from those already related. Whereas everything hitherto was a reflection of outer life and feeling, there now begins a kind of inner life. In the Saturn world, a life of light begins flickering here and there and growing dim again. A quivering glimmer is seen in some places, something like flashes of lightning in others. The Saturn heat bodies begin to glimmer, to sparkle, and even to emit rays. This stage of evolution having been reached, there again arises the possibility for certain beings to develop their activity. They are known to occult science as sons of fire. Although these beings have an astral body, they are unable at this particular stage of their existence to stir their own astral bodies. They would not be capable of any feeling or emotion unless they could act upon the Saturn heat bodies which have attained the stage of evolution described. The action affords them the possibility of recognizing their own existence from the effect which they produce. They cannot say to themselves, "I am here," but rather, "My environment causes me to be here." They have perceptions, and what they perceive is the light effects in Saturn which have been described. I am not going to stop and discuss these things, right? We have done that in all 4 sections, right? I don't believe in this Saturn situation at all. I don't believe that it is necessary. I don't believe that it happened. And especially not in the way that it is described. And so I'm going to try to burn through as much of this information as we can. Just roll through it without trying to stop, right? If I get too annoyed, I will. But this one's probably just going to be a reading into the record more than anything. Because I'm tired of discussing the same terribly conceived idea again and again. These are, in a certain manner, their ego. This gives them a peculiar kind of consciousness. It is designated picture consciousness. It may be represented as having the nature of human dream consciousness, except that the degree of activity it enjoys must be imagined as being very much greater than it is in human dreams, and also that it is not a question of shadowy dream pictures floating hither and thither, but of pictures that have a real connection. A real connection with the play of light on Saturn. During this reciprocal action between the sons of fire and the Saturn heat bodies, the germs of the human sense organs begin their evolution. The organs, by means of which contemporary man becomes cognizant of the physical world, begin to shine in their first delicate ethereal outlines. Human phantoms, displaying as yet nothing but the primeval light pictures of the sense organs, become discernible within Saturn to the clairvoyant faculty of perception. Thus, these sense organs are the result of the activity of the sons of fire, but they are not the only spirits who shared in their creation. Other beings come onto the scene of Saturn at the same time as these sons of fire, being so far advanced in their evolution that they are able to make use of the germs of the human sense organ for beholding the cosmic events taking place in the Saturn life. They are the Lords of Love. If they were not there, the sons of fire could not have the consciousness described above. They behold the events on Saturn with a consciousness which makes it possible for them to convey these events as pictures to the sons of fire. They themselves forego all the advantages which might accrue to them from contemplating events on Saturn. They renounce all joys and pleasures. They give up all these in order that the sons of fire may come into possession of them. A new period of Saturn's existence succeeds these occurrences. Something else is added to the play of light. If what here presents itself to clairvoyant perception be reported, it may seem an absurdity to many. Within Saturn, intermingled sensations of taste seem to be surging. Sweet, bitter, sour, etc. are perceived throughout the interior of Saturn, while without, in cosmic space, all this expresses itself as tone, a kind of music. That's probably the only true thing that is indeed in this part. In the course of these processes, there are again certain beings who find it possible to develop activity on Saturn. These are the sons of twilight or life. They enter into reciprocal action with the forces of taste surging up and down within Saturn. By this means, their etheric or vital body attain a state of such activity that it may be called a kind of metabolism. They bring life into the interior of Saturn. Hence, processes of nutrition and excretion take place. This inner life makes it possible for yet another being to come into the planet. The Lords of Harmony, they bestow a dim kind of consciousness on the sons of life, which is even more vague and dim than the dream consciousness of contemporary man. It is of the kind that is now comes to man in dreamless sleep, and is indeed of such a low order that it does not, so to speak, enter into his consciousness. Yet it is there. It differs from waking consciousness in degree and also in its nature. Plants, too, have this dreamless sleep consciousness at the present time, even though it does not bring about any perceptions of an external world. In the human sense of the word, yet it regulates the life processes and brings them into harmony with the processes of the outer world. This adjustment cannot be perceived by the sons of life at the stage of Saturn's evolution now being described. But the Lords of Harmony perceive it, and therefore it is they who really do the adjusting. All this life is enacted within the human phantoms already described. To clairvoyant vision, they consequently appear animated, yet their life is only a semblance of life. It is the life of the sons of life, who, so to speak, make use of the human phantoms in order to manifest themselves. Let us now turn our attention to the human phantoms with their semblance of life. During the Saturn period described, their form is constantly changing. Sometimes they bear one aspect, sometimes another. In the further course of evolution, their forms become more definite and occasionally permanent. This is due to their becoming interpenetrated by the action of the spirits described at the beginning of the Saturn evolution, the Lords of Will, the Thrones. The consequence is that the human phantom itself is endowed with the simplest, dullest form of consciousness. This must be thought of as still duller than the consciousness of dream sleep. Under present conditions, minerals have that consciousness. It brings the inner beings into harmony with the outer physical world. On Saturn, it is the Lords of Will who regulate that harmony. And thus man appears as a copy of Saturn life itself, that life which is on a large scale on Saturn and, at this stage, on a small scale in man. Thus, the first germ is prepared for that which is only a germ in contemporary man, the spirit man, Atma. This dull human will, within Saturn, is manifested to clairvoyant faculty by effects which may be compared with odors. Outside in celestial space, there is a manifestation like that of a personality, which, however, is not directed by an inner ego, but is regulated from without, like a machine. Those who regulate it are the Lords of Will. It will become evident from a survey of the foregoing that starting from the previously described middle period of the Saturn evolution, the following steps of that evolution can be characterized by comparing their effects with the sense perceptions of the present time. It might be said that the Saturn evolution manifests as heat, then a play of light is added, then an appearance of taste and sound, and finally something emerges which manifests within the interior of Saturn as sensations of smell, and without as a human ego acting mechanically. What have the Saturn revelations to say about what preceded the heat condition? Now, this is something that cannot be compared with anything accessible to our outer sense perception. A state of things precedes the heat condition, which contemporary man experiences only in his inner being. When he gives himself up to ideas which he forms in his own soul, without having any inducement brought to bear on him by external impression, then he has something within himself which cannot be perceived by any physical sense, but is only accessible to the perception of the higher clairvoyant vision. Manifestations precede the heat condition of Saturn, which can only be perceived by a clairvoyant. 3 such conditions may be mentioned. Pure psychic warmth, not outwardly perceptible; pure spiritual light, which is outward darkness; and lastly, something of a spiritual essence which is complete in itself and needs no outer being in order to become self-conscious. Pure inner heat accompanies the appearance of the Lords of Motion. Pure spiritual light, that of the Lords of Wisdom, and pure inner being is linked with the first emanations of the Lords of Will. Thus, the appearance of heat on Saturn, our evolution comes forth out of the inner life of pure spirituality into outwardly manifested existence. It will be particularly difficult for present-day consciousness to accept this, if it must be said in addition that at the same time with the advent of the Saturn heat condition, what we call time also makes its first appearance. That is to say, the previous conditions have nothing to do with time. They belong to that sphere which may be called in occult science duration. Duration is a length of time. I don't give a shit if you do not believe that time did not exist until this particular period. Any time that there was movement, there was time being moved. If there is one single element in the entire of existence by which there is the rotation of the electrons around the nucleus, time is a factor. It does not matter that we were not there to record the time. It does not matter that there was no human beings present in existence at all. Time still moved. There was still change being enacted by the Spirit, and therefore there was time. Time is the Logos in fucking action. It is not some separated thing. It is part of our dimensions, and us being able to grasp the capacity to understand time is what puts us in the 5th dimension, right? The capacity to understand that time does indeed change. Well, that's us. That is us fully embracing our humanness and, understanding something that was pre-existent. It did not start just because humanity started. It did not start just because we have the observation of it. If a tree falls in the fucking woods, it does make a sound. And if there is movement in the universe, time is existent. Those 2 things are real. It doesn't matter that there are questions that can be played about them in order to speculate, right? The whole question about the sound of the tree falling in the woods, it is a speculation to make you think deeper. Maybe it doesn't, maybe it does. That's that bullshit psychology, that victim mentality bullshit, right? Yes, it exists. There is sound whether or not someone is there to observe it. Yes, there is time whether or not there is someone there to record it. Yes, time did exist before humans were aware that there was a thing called time. Time is just the mechanism that we use to explain the movement of things, the fucking duration. I know. I'm in a bad mood this morning, so, right, that's why I'm trying to burn through it without getting too salty, because I am a little bit salty today. And yes, I am working on it. I am trying to alchemize, but shit is rolling downhill rather rapidly. Consequently, everything that is said in this book about the conditions existing in the sphere of duration must be understood in such a way that when expressions referring to time conditions are used, they are only to be accepted for the sake of comparison and explanation. That which, in a certain sense, precedes time can be expressed in human language only by terms which imply the idea of time. Even if we are aware that the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Saturn conditions were not enacted one after the other, in the present sense of the word, yet we cannot do otherwise than describe them one after the other. Indeed, in spite of their duration or coexistence in time, they are so dependent on one another that this very dependence may be compared with sequence in time. This indication of the first conditions of evolution on Saturn also throw light on any further questions that may be asked as to the origin of those conditions. From the purely intellectual point of view, it is of course quite possible, when dealing with the source of anything, to inquire after the source of the source. But in the face of facts, this is not possible. A comparison, however, will help us to realize this. If we find ruts on a road, we may ask, to what are they due? And the reply may be, to a carriage. It may further be asked, whence did the carriage come? Whither is it going? An answer founded on fact is again possible. We may then proceed to ask, who occupied the carriage? What purpose had the person in using it? What was he or she doing? At last, however, we shall reach a point at which inquiry by means of facts finds its natural limit, and on inquiring further, we get away from the original questions. We only continue the inquiry mechanically, as it were. I do not see anything that you have asked that is not able to be answered factually. Yes, you may have to do a little legwork to get there, right? You got to go chase down the carriage and ask them, what were you doing? Why were you using the carriage? But it is possible to answer that factually. You do not have to rely upon speculation. In such matters as the one brought forward as a comparison, it is easy to see where facts demand the end of the inquiry. It is not so evident when we are face to face with great cosmic questions. But, as the result of really exact observations, it will nevertheless be seen that all inquiry as to origins must come to an end at the Saturn condition portrayed above. For we have reached a region in which beings and events are no longer justified by that from which they proceed, but by themselves. As a result of the Saturn evolution, it appears that the human germ developed up to a certain point. It attained the low, dim state of consciousness described above. We must not imagine that its evolution does not begin with the last of the Saturn stages. The Lords of Will carry on their work through all conditions. Only the result is the most striking to clairvoyant perception in the last period. There is nothing like a fixed boundary between the activities of these several groups of beings. If it is said that the Lords of Will work first, then the Lords of Wisdom, and so on, it is not meant that they are working only at that time. They are working all through the Saturn evolution, only their activity can best be observed during the period specified. The several groups have, as it were, the leadership at those times. Thus, the whole Saturn evolution appears as a working out of what streamed forth from the Lords of Will, through the Lords of Wisdom, Motion, Form, and the rest. Through this process, these spiritual beings themselves experience evolution. For instance, after they have received their life reflected back from Saturn, the Lords of Wisdom stand on a different level than before. The result of that activity exalts their faculties of their own being. The consequence is that on the completion of such activity, something similar to human sleep comes upon them. To their periods of activity in connection with Saturn succeeds other periods during which they live, as it were, in other worlds. At these times, their activity is withdrawn from Saturn. On this account, clairvoyant perception sees an ascent and a descent in the Saturn evolution that has been described. The ascent lasts until the formation of the heat condition. Then, with the play of light, the ebb tide sets in. When the human phantoms have assumed form through the Lords of Will, the spiritual beings have also gradually withdrawn themselves. The Saturn evolution dies away as a phase of evolution. It disappears. A kind of resting pause occurs. The human germ at the same time enters upon a state of dissolution, not, however, a state in which it passes away, but one like that of a plant seed resting in the earth in order that it may ripen into a new plant. Thus, the human germ reposes until a new awakening in the depth of the cosmos. And by the time the moment of awakening has arrived, The spiritual beings described above have acquired, under other conditions, the faculties by means of which they can further advance the human germ. The Lords of Wisdom have, in their etheric body, gained the faculty not only of enjoying the reflection of life as they did on Saturn, but of pouring life forth from themselves and endowing other beings with it. The Lords of Motion are now as far advanced as were the Lords of Wisdom on Saturn. Then the lowest principle of their being was the astral body. Now they possess an etheric or vital body, and in a corresponding degree the other spiritual beings have reached a further stage of evolution. All these spiritual beings are therefore able to work at the further evolution of the human germ in a different way than on Saturn. But the human germ was dissolved at the end of the Saturn evolution in order that the more highly evolved spirit beings might resume their work where they had left it off. The human germ must once more briefly recapitulate the stages through which it had passed on Saturn. This, in fact, is what appears to clairvoyant faculties of perception. The human germ comes forth out of its retirement and begins to develop by its own ability, by means of the forces which had been implanted within it on Saturn. It comes forth out of the darkness as a being of will, and assumes the appearance of life, of soul qualities, etc., up to that mechanical manifestation of personality which it possessed at the end of the Saturn evolution. The second of the great periods of evolution that have been mentioned, the Sun period, affects the raising of man's being to a higher stage of consciousness than that which it had attained on Saturn. Compared with man's present state of consciousness, the Sun condition might certainly be termed unconsciousness, for it is approximately the condition which contemporary man experiences during absolutely dreamless sleep. Or it might be compared to the low degree of consciousness in which our vegetable world now slumbers. For occult science, there is no such thing as unconsciousness, but only different degrees of consciousness. Everything in the world is conscious. In the course of the Sun evolution, the human being attains a higher degree of consciousness through the incorporation within it of the etheric or vital body. Before this can take place, the Saturn conditions must be recapitulated in the manner described above. This recapitulation has quite a definite meaning. That is to say, when the period of rest which was spoken of in the foregoing statement has come to an end, that which was formerly Saturn issues forth out of cosmic sleep as a new celestial body, the Sun. But the conditions of evolution have meanwhile changed. The spiritual beings, whose activity on behalf of Saturn we have portrayed, have progressed onward into different conditions. Yet, at first, the human germ appears on the newly formed Sun in the form it possessed on Saturn. It has, first of all, so to transform the various stages of evolution through which it has passed on Saturn, that they may suit the new conditions on the Sun. Consequently, the Sun epoch begins with a recapitulation of the occurrences on Saturn, adjusted to the changed conditions of Sun life. Now, when the human being has advanced so far that the stage of evolution it reached on Saturn has been adopted to the Sun conditions, the Lords of Wisdom, already mentioned, begin to let the etheric or vital body pour into the physical body. The higher stage which man reaches on the Sun may therefore be characterized in this way. The physical body, already formed in the germ state on Saturn, is raised to a second stage of perfection by becoming the vehicle of an etheric or vital body. This last named etheric body attains its first degree of perfection on its own account during the Sun evolution. In order, however, that the second degree of perfection for the physical and the first for the etheric body may be reached, the intervention of still another spirit beings is necessary during the further course of the Sun life, in a similar manner to that which has been described as taking place during the Saturn stage. When the Lords of Wisdom began to stream forth their etheric body, the Sun, previously dark, began to shine. At the same time, the first appearances of interactivity are seen in the human germ. Life has begun. What has to be described as a semblance of life on Saturn now becomes actual life. The influx lasts for a certain time, at the end of which an important change for the human germ sets in. That is to say, it organizes itself into two parts. Whereas up to this point the physical and etheric bodies formed an intimately connected whole, the physical body now begins to detach itself as a separate part. Yet, even that separated physical body is still pervaded by the etheric body. Therefore, we have now to do with a human being composed of two principles. One portion is a physical body permeated by an etheric body. The other is an etheric body and nothing else. This separation comes to pass, however, during a period of rest in the sun life. During this pause, the shining which had begun to appear dies away. The separation takes place during a cosmic night, as it were. Yet, this interval of rest is much shorter than the one between the Saturn and Sun evolutions mentioned above. At the expiration of the rest period of the Lords of Wisdom work for a while on the twofold being of man, just as they had previously done on the undivided being. Then the Lords of Motion begin their activity. They cause their own astral body to stream through the human etheric body. By this means, man acquires the capacity for executing certain inner movements in the physical body. These movements may be compared with those of sap in a plant of our own time. The Saturn body consisted exclusively of heat substance. During the Sun evolution, the heat substance is condensed into a state which may be compared with that of our present-day gas, or steam. In occult science, air is the name ordinarily used for this condition. The first beings of such a state are seen after the Lords of Motion have begun their activity. The following spectacle is presented to clairvoyant consciousness. Within the heat substance, there appears something like delicate formations which are set in rhythmic motion by the forces of the etheric body. These formations represent the human physical body at the stage of evolution now attained by it. They are permeated through and through with heat and are also wrapped, as it were, in a heat envelope. From a physical point of view, man's nature may now be said to be composed of heat structures with air forms embedded in them, the latter in regular motion. Hence, if we wish to retain the foregoing comparison with a plant of the present day, we must remember that it is not a solid plant organism which we have to consider, but an air or gas form, the movements of which may be compared with the circulation of the sap in plants of today. The evolution thus indicated continues. After a certain time, another interval of rest sets in. After this, the Lords of Motion go on working until their activity is supplemented by that of the Lords of Form. The effect of the latter is that the gas structures, which before were constantly changing, now assume lasting form. This, too, happens because the Lords of Form cause their forces to flow in and out of the human etheric body. When the Lords of Motion alone were acting on the gaseous organisms, these were in perpetual motion, not keeping their form for an instant. Now, however, they temporarily assume distinguishable shapes. Again, after a certain period, there occurs a time of rest, and then once more the Lords of Form continue their activity. But the conditions within the Sun evolution are now entirely changed. For the point has been reached when the Sun evolution has attained its zenith. This is the time at which the Lords of Personality, who attain their human stage on Saturn, ascend to a higher degree of perfection. They advance beyond the human stage. They attain a form of consciousness which contemporary man does not yet possess in his normal course of development on the Earth. He will acquire it when the Earth, the fourth of the planetary stages of evolution, has reached its goal and has entered upon the next planetary period. Then, man will not only perceive around him what his present physical senses enable him to apprehend, but he will be able to see in images the inner psychic conditions of the beings surrounding him. He will have a clairvoyant picture consciousness, although retaining complete self-consciousness. There will be nothing dreamlike or vague in his clairvoyance, but he will perceive what is psychic, in pictures certainly, but in such a way that these images will be the expression of realities, as physical colors and sounds are now. Man, at present, can attain to this degree of clairvoyance only through occult training, which will be treated later in this book. Now, this clairvoyance is attained by the sons of personality as a gift of their normal evolution midway in the sun period, and it is just on this account that they become capable of acting on the newly formed etheric body of man during the sun evolution, in a way similar to that in which they acted upon the physical body in Saturn. Just as there the heat reflected their own personality back to them, so do the gaseous organisms now reflect back to them, in gleams of light, the images of their clairvoyant consciousness. They clairvoyantly behold what is taking place on the sun, and this vision is by no means mere observation. It is as though something of the force which mortals call love made itself felt in the images which stream forth from the sun. If a clairvoyant looks more closely, he will find the cause of this phenomenon. Exalted beings have blended their activity with the light that is being radiated from the sun. They are the lords of love, the Christian seraphim, already mentioned. Henceforth they act together with the sons of personality on the human etheric or vital body. By means of that activity, the etheric body advances a step further along its path of evolution. It acquires the capacity not only of transforming the gaseous forms within it, but of elaborating them that the first indications of a propagation of living humans appear. Emanations, so to speak, are driven out, as though exuded, from the gaseous organisms that take on shapes resembling their mother forms. In order to describe the further course of the sun evolutions, reference must be made to a fact in the formation of worlds which is of the greatest possible significance. It is this, that by no means every being attains the goals of its evolution in the course of one epoch. There are some that fall short of that goal. Thus, during the Saturn evolution, not all of the sons of personality actually reached the human stage, for which, as described above, they were destined. Why? They had absolutely nothing to do except exist. How did they fall short of just existing? Or is this a rationalization to support a preconceived notion? Maybe an argument that you were anticipating coming? Maybe that's what's going on here. Maybe it's you trying to head off an objection that you know is coming, but they literally had nothing to do except exist during the Saturn existence. There's no possible way that they fucked that up, right? Just existing is something that even plants can do. Like, I do not understand this logic, right? This is not a logical chain of events. This is an explanation for the superstitious. That's what this is. This is explaining to those who require some kind of an explanation for things that is supernatural, right? I do believe in supernatural things, but I do not believe that it is necessarily some supernatural development process as described here that led to us being here. None of that was necessity, and so there is no reason to believe it. There is absolutely no reason to believe that any of these entities that were on Saturn who merely had to exist fucked it up, right? There's no way possible that they were left behind because they did not reach that which they were destined to do. Right, that bothers me just as much as anything else. The misuse of this particular word. Destined means that it's going to happen whether you actively participate in it or not. So if you were destined to rise and to become this next stage of evolution, there is nothing that could interrupt that. And just as little did all of the physical human bodies developed on Saturn attain the degree of maturity which qualifies them to become vehicles of an independent etheric body on the sun. The consequence is that beings and organisms are present on the sun which are not in harmony with their environment. These must now make up, during the sun evolution, for what they failed to attain on Saturn. The following may therefore be clairvoyantly observed during the sun period. When the Lords of Wisdom began their pouring in of the etheric body, the sun body is, to some extent, darkened. Structures are mingled with it which, properly speaking, belong to Saturn. They are heat organisms which are not able to condense themselves into air in the proper manner. These are the human beings left behind in the Saturn stage. They are not able to become vehicles of a normally developed etheric body. Now, the heat substance of Saturn, which has thus been left behind, splits into two parts on the Sun. One is absorbed, as it were, by human bodies, and henceforward forms a kind of lower nature within man's being. Thus, something which really corresponds to the Saturn stage is incorporated in the bodily part of man on the Sun. Now, just as the Saturn body of man made it possible for the sons of personality to raise themselves to the human stage, the Saturn part of man performs the same office on the Sun for the sons of fire. They raise themselves to the human stage by letting their forces flow in and out of the Saturn part of man, as did the sons of personality on Saturn. This also happens during the middle period of the Sun evolution. The Saturn part of the human being is then so far matured that with its help the sons of fire, archangeloi, are able to pass through their human stage. The archangel's human stage, you say. Another part of the Saturnian heat substance becomes detached and attains an independent existence alongside of and among the human beings of the Sun. This forms a second kingdom by the side of the human kingdom, a kingdom which develops on the Sun only a perfectly independent physical body, like a heat body. In consequence of this, the fully evolved sons of personality are not able to direct their activity towards any independent etheric body in the manner before described. But there were also certain sons of personality left behind at the Saturn stage who fell short of the human stage. A bond of attraction exists between them and the second Sun kingdom, which has become independent. They must now act towards the backward kingdom on the Sun as their advanced brethren did in Saturn in regard to human beings. The latter had only their physical body perfected here, but there is no possibility on the Sun for such a work on the part of the backward Son of personality. They therefore separate themselves from the Sun body and form an independent celestial body outside it. This body, accordingly, withdraws from the Sun, and from it the backward sons of personality act on the beings of the second Sun kingdom which have been described. In this way, two world organisms have been formed out of the one which was previously Saturn. The Sun has now in its environment a second celestial body, one which exhibits a kind of rebirth of Saturn, a new Saturn. From this Saturn, the character of personality is conferred on the second Sun kingdom. Therefore, within this kingdom we have to do with beings which have no personality on the Sun itself. Yet, they reflect back to the sons of personality on the new Saturn, the special personality of those spirits. Clairvoyant consciousness is able to observe among the human beings on the Sun heat forces which act upon the regular course of the Sun evolution, and in which the sway of the spirits described as belonging to the new Saturn is to be seen. We notice the following facts about man's being during the middle period of the Sun evolution. It is divided into a physical body and an etheric body. Within these, the activity of the advanced sons of personality plays conjointly with that of the lords of love. Now, part of the backward Saturn nature is mingled with the physical body. In this plays the activity of the sons of fire. We now see in everything which the sons of fire effect on the backward Saturn nature, the forerunners of the present human sense organs. It has been shown how these sons of fire were already at work on the elaboration of the sense germs in the heat substance on Saturn. The first outline of the present human glands is to be recognized in what is accomplished by the sons of personality conjointly with the lords of love, seraphim. But the above described is not the whole of the activity of the sons of personality dwelling on the new Saturn. They not only extend their activity to the second Sun kingdom mentioned above, but they also establish a kind of connection between that kingdom and the human senses. This heat substances of the kingdom flow in and out of the germs of the human sense organs. But that by this means the human being on the sun acquires a kind of perception of the lower kingdom situated outside him. That perception is naturally a dim one, closely corresponding to the dull Saturn consciousness previously described, and it consists essentially of varied heat effects. Everything here described as taking place in the middle of the sun evolution continues for a certain definite period. Then, a time of rest again occurs. After that, things continue for a while in the same manner up to a certain point of evolution, at which the human etheric body is so far matured that a united action of the sons of life, angeloi, and the lords of harmony, cherubim, can set in. To clairvoyant consciousness, certain manifestations now appear within man's being, which may be compared with perceptions of taste, and which are made known externally as sounds. A similar thing has already been stated about the Saturn evolution, but here on the sun, the processes relating to human beings are more from within, and are full of more independent life. The sons of life thereby acquire that dim picture consciousness which the sons of fire had already attained on Saturn. In this, the lords of harmony are their helpers. They really behold clairvoyantly what is now being enacted within the sun evolution. Only they give up all of the results of that contemplation and the enjoyment of those revelations of wisdom that arise from it, and allow them to stream, like splendid visions of enchantment, into the dreamlike consciousness of the sons of life. The latter again work these pictures of their visions into the etheric body of man, so that it attains higher and higher stages of development. Again, an interval of rest ensues. Again, everything is awakened from cosmic sleep. And after further lapse of time, the human being is sufficiently advanced to use its own forces. These forces are the same that poured forth into man's being by the thrones during the latter part of the Saturn period. This human being now evolves an inner life, which, in its manifestation to clairvoyant consciousness, may be compared with an inner perception of smell. But outside, in the direction of celestial space, man's being is manifested as a personality, though not one directed by an inner ego. It appears more like a plant with the character of a personality. It has been stated that at the end of the Saturn evolution, personality is manifested somewhat machine-like, and just as then, the first germ was developed of that which still remains a germ in contemporary man, the spirit man, Atma. So at this point, there is formed a similar first germ of the life spirit, Buddhi. When all this has continued for some time, an interval of rest again occurs. Following this, as in previous instances, the activity of human being is resumed for a while. Then, conditions commence which mark a new intervention of the Lords of Wisdom. By its means, human nature becomes capable of feeling the first traces of sympathy and antipathy for its environment. In all this, there is still no real sensation, but only a premonition of sensation. For the inner life activity, which might be characterized in its manifestation as perception of smell, is revealed externally as a kind of primitive language. If the human being is inwardly conscious of a useful smell or taste or glitter, it is manifested outwardly by a sound, and the same thing happens in a corresponding way with an inwardly uncongenial perception. Through all the events described, the real meaning of the sun evolution for the human being is indicated. The human being has reached a higher stage of consciousness than that of the Saturn period. It is the consciousness of sleep. After a time, the point of evolution is also reached at which the higher beings connect with the sun stage, must pass into other spheres in order to work out that which they have endowed themselves by their work on the human being. A long period of rest sets in, one similar to that between Saturn and Sun evolutions. Everything that has been perfected on the Sun passes into a condition which may be compared with that of a plant when its powers of growth are resting in the seed. But just as those powers of growth appear again in a new plant, so does everything that was living on the Sun come forth again after the period of rest from the cosmic depths to begin a new planetary existence. The meaning of such a term of rest or cosmic sleep will be readily understood if we only direct our spiritual vision to one of the orders of beings already mentioned, for instance, to the Lords of Wisdom. They were not far enough evolved on Saturn to be able to ray forth an etheric body from themselves. They were only prepared for this after they had gone through their experiences on Saturn. During the rest, pralaya, they transform into actual capacity what has been previously only prepared within them. Thus, on the Sun, they were evolved far enough to pour forth from themselves and to endow the human beings with an etheric body of its own. Alright, we are going to go ahead and call it here. There's another 15 minutes, but this is the beginning of another section, and if it is as long as the last section, it's going to be about 45 minutes. And so we'll go ahead and wrap this one up and pick it up again tomorrow. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult set of topics. I understand I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those, especially if I'm salty. But I do not apologize for it. It is a necessity, right? I didn't have a whole lot to add to this other than my two objections. I feel like I explained fairly well why I was annoyed with it, right? There is a feeling of annoying that I'm grabbing with this book. I'm not going to stop it like we did with Agrippa, right? We're going to finish this. But it does appear that there is not a whole lot of wisdom that can actually be attained from any of these works, right? We're going to go through this. We're going to do Aleister Crowley. And then we're going to pivot because there's not a whole lot of anything that can be pulled from these books. There's some hints at wisdom that is contained, not even really any keys to finding those hints. And so it's mostly an exercise in futility, and that's probably got something to do with my saltiness. Right? My home life situation definitely has something to deal with that, right? And bills and things like that come due. But overall, right, there's not a whole lot to add to this. This was entirely speculative. It was entirely only available by clairvoyant observation of a thing that you have already determined is going to be there. So you are going to find what you have already determined to find. You will find that which you focus on, and he is most definitely focusing on these different epochs. It is possible that this is the actual way that it happened. It is not, however, very likely. There is no need for any of this to have been the process by which we attained where we are. Anything at all. Like, there's no need for a development of a astral body on Saturn and an etheric body on the Sun. That is just somebody trying to explain something that is already there, right? He is trying to explain some of the things that they talk about from the Buddhism and the Brahmins, right? The Far Eastern religious organizations have many of these concepts pre-existent, and so he is trying to adjust his understanding to make room for this thing that may or may not be true. And so it is speculative. Every single bit of this. There is no single part of this that I would point to that was actually verified by any type of understanding whatsoever. You can have a clairvoyant experience and find exactly what you are looking for, and that is probably what happened here. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree with anything that was stated, put it in the box down below, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of the book, where I actually do give value, at least in my own estimation. There are actual steps and things you can do in here, whereas this is kind of just a whole lot of speculation. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.